Hi guys, so before we get into it, a very quick disclaimer that there will be spoilers today, although I won't tell you who the killer is because we don't really find out until the final few minutes or so. I always have this rule in place whenever it's a film like this, and this is definitely one of those. So there have been 2 or 3 people who have recommended this in the comments recently. It's another film by Sidney Hayers. He, of course, did Revenge, which I covered just a few weeks ago, although, you know what, never mind Hayers. You guys had me at Suzy, Kendall. And when you throw Leslie Ann Down into the pile of chips in the middle of the table as well, then at that point, I am literally all in. I'm not just ready to watch the film, I'm going to do a full review as well, so let's do it. This takes place in an all-girls school. I don't think we have same-sex schools in the UK anymore. I think that has been phased out as a concept, and if that's true, I'm very glad about that. I can't think of anything crueler than forcing teenage boys to grow up without ever seeing any girls on a day-to-day basis. But the all-girls school in this works quite well. It just means there's no convenient boyfriend muscle for the girls to hide behind. Now, this school is separated from the town's residential areas by a small patch of woods, and the girls are often tempted to take a shortcut through the woods to get home, even though it is forbidden by the school's headmistress. But the trouble is, a rapist has set up shop in these woods. That's a terrible way to phrase it. A rapist has established a base of operations. That's another terrible way to phrase it. Let's just say there's a rapist in the woods, right? And in the first sequence in this movie, he gets this girl called Tessa, played by Leslie Ann Down, but he doesn't kill her, he just rapes her. So this character is still in the rest of the movie. But then a few days later, he picks off another victim, except this time he rapes and murders her. So his activities are escalating, the police are drafted in. But the movie changes course after about 20 minutes because there's an art teacher at the school called Julie, played by Suzy Kendall, and she accidentally gets a glimpse of the killer in the woods, and maybe she'll be able to identify him. So for the rest of the movie, the killer stops going after random teenage girls and starts focusing his attentions on Julie. He wants to kill her so that there's no possibility that she could identify him in a police lineup. Although, conveniently, she does know the face of the killer, but she sort of doesn't as well. She can't quite remember his features. You know, we've seen this in lots of giallo films. It's very cheesy. The final girl, she knows the face. It's on the tip of her tongue, but she can't quite describe that face. But who knows? If she looks into the right portrait, or if she sits in the right room that's bathed in infrared lighting, then maybe it will suddenly come to her and the mystery will be solved. But whatever, it's absolutely fine. So I really like the setting of this movie, especially the woods, because they haven't glamorized the woods in this. The patch of woodland that you see, it feels like the sort of place that would be just next to a large town. And there are giveaway signs with this. So there's like this giant electricity pylon in the middle of the trees, and it's the sort of place where if you look above the treetops, you half expect to see a couple of tower blocks in the distance, or maybe a giant Predator 2 sign. But going back to the electricity pylon, this seems to be the centrepiece of the story. It's always there. Like in the very first scene, the first rape takes place next to this pylon, and then we see it a bunch of other times. And then in the finale, that's where it takes place, next to this electricity pylon. It appears so often that I started to wonder if there was some kind of deeper meaning behind the pylon in this plot. And the first thing I thought of is that maybe it's giving off some kind of heat that makes characters subconsciously run towards it. Maybe the woods are cold, but the pylon is warm, so people just kind of gravitate towards it somehow. But then it crossed my mind that maybe the pylon, because of the shape of it, maybe it's meant to represent some kind of giant phallic object, or maybe like a giant penis, if we want to be a bit more direct. The Tessa character seems to be in a trance whenever she sees this pylon. It's like she's equal parts fascinated and horrified by it, a bit like a teenage girl would be with an actual penis. And at the end of this film, the killer tries to climb up the pylon in a really ill-advised escape attempt, but maybe this is the movie being ironic. Maybe the movie is saying, well, look, this killer, he's dying on this big, large, phallic-shaped thing when he spent so much of his life inflicting misery on other people with his much smaller phallic thing. On the other hand, maybe Sydney just intended it to be nothing more than an electricity pylon. We must also consider that as well. I can pinpoint for you the exact moment that this film really starts to kick into gear. So it's pretty much when Julie becomes the main character, actually. So I think I've seen 4 Suzy Kendall movies now, all in the past couple of years. This is easily her best performance. I watched Torso a few weeks ago, and as much as I enjoyed it, I do look back on it as being a really cool giallo film that just happened to have Suzy Kendall in it as the lead. Whereas a few years from now, when I look back on Assault, I think I'm more likely to picture it as a really cool Suzy Kendall movie that just happened to feel a little bit like a giallo at times. It would be easy to say that she's more comfortable here than in Torso because she's doing the part in her native tongue, but I think it's actually more because she's playing a slightly older woman. I just think she really suits being an art teacher over playing a university student. It's quite cute that she just happens to have this snazzy little cottage, a bit like Miss Honey and Matilda. These days, I think this character would be saving up until about the age of 50 just to be able to afford a small hut in the Rape Woods. But there are some really cool characteristics to this Julie person. I love how she jumps into her car very early on with a bunch of the students and just zooms off looking for one of the potential victims who's gone missing. I mean, Julie starts driving around these trees like Roger Moore in For Your Eyes Only, and even though they don't ultimately rescue the girl in danger, the fact that Julie even attempted this really put me on side with the character for the rest of the movie. I like how she uses her art at home to try and jog her own memory as to what the killer might look like, and actually I was a bit surprised in the end that the pictures weren't the catalyst for her remembering. Now, her fashions are just so good in this as well. Like, they've really dressed this character extremely well. This is the best use of glasses on a character I've seen in a long, long time. It's not just the case that Kendall looks super hot in this film. That would be simplifying it way too much. Mainly, she just looks really damn cool. Like, this is the epitome of a really cool movie character, period. Leslie Ann Down fares considerably less well. Her character is very static in this. I just don't think we spend enough time with her at the beginning before the first rape. If I compare this film to the first Friday the 13th film, when we get to spend a good 10-15 minutes getting to know Annie and then the kill in the woods happens, it's really powerful because we've gotten to know that character a little bit. The film sacrifices 10 or 15 minutes so that this can happen. But Assault doesn't do the same thing. I don't think we even hear Tessa speak until the assault in the woods, and so it doesn't quite have the same gravitas for me. It's not enough just to have the character's clothes ripped open. That's not what makes it powerful. What would is if we got to know Tessa, and we don't. But even later in the film, she's a little bit too zombie-like for me. Now, I don't want to make light of how people would recover from a rape. Maybe in real life, what's shown here would be very accurate in terms of how a woman might completely shut down and her personality just disappears inside herself. Absolutely fair enough. However, from the point of view of us having an enjoyable movie, I think it might have been better if this particular character had recovered from her ordeal at least enough so that she could enjoy seeing the killer die at the end of the movie. That could have been quite satisfying. As it is, Tessa seems very oblivious to everything going on in the third act here. Because this movie switches its attention to Julie quite early on, we don't get a lot of viewpoints from the schoolgirls in this film, and I think that leads to a few illogical character actions on behalf of the schoolgirls that maybe the film is not completely aware of. So we've got this first rape that happens, and then a few days later, one of the other girls decides to go home through the same path in the woods by herself, knowing full well that the rapist is still out there. Really? Later on, we find out that the headmistress's husband is having some kind of affair with one of the schoolgirls. I don't know if he's sleeping with her, but he's certainly taking photos of her nude with her consent, seemingly. But then we see a scene where he starts touching her up in the library, and she seems to allow this and be fine with it. But if you're in her shoes, would you not stop to think, okay, maybe this creepy guy I'm having a little bit of a fling with, maybe it's the same guy who's been raping and murdering people in the woods, like just across the road? That thought never seems to cross her mind. But we don't really fully explore this subplot. I would have quite liked to know what this affair was about and how it started and what's in it for the girl, but it ends up being a little bit of an unanswered question. So the husband of the headmistress, his name is Leslie. I've just looked it up off camera. What a fascinating character. I mean, on the one hand, he's an absolute creep, yes, but I don't think I've ever seen a movie character before who wants to be arrested for rape and murder. Does he have no imagination as to what might happen to him in a prison with those types of convictions next to his name? But I could just about believe that at least one person in the world would have this warped desire in their heads that they want to be seen as this brute person who could commit all these horrible crimes against teenage girls. When he throws the wine glass into the fireplace and his wife just laughs at him, I thought that was quite a satisfying end for those characters, actually. There's lots of colourful people in this film who are the potential killers. So there's a reporter who acts like a bit of a failed rock star cum reporter. He's sauntering around like a Liam Gallagher sort of persona. He reminded me of Dave Angel from the Fast Show, if you ever saw that years and years ago. There's also a doctor called Bartell, who is the spit of the actor Charles Gray. Like, it's uncanny. It's as if they took Charles Gray, or how he would have looked in the 40s or 50s, and then dropped him into 1972 so he could be in this movie. I was so convinced that when I came away from this film and went on Wikipedia, I would discover that this actor playing Bartell was a relation to Charles Gray. I was really surprised to discover that there is no relation there, because, God, they both look so similar. I really enjoyed this movie. Honestly, like, whoever put the recommendation for this in the comments, I've got to really give you my most sincerest of thanks, because I thought this was an awesome film. I think there's a few people who regularly watch these reviews now who really have a good grasp on the types of films that I like, because this was an extremely good one. And there's a couple of really intense moments that I've got to at least touch upon before I wrap up. The pharmacy explosion is terrific. Like, it's signposted, you should see it coming, and yet it's still a massive surprise when it happens. And also the death of the killer towards the end. Again, it's kind of signposted. We see the electricity pylon so much that we should expect a death like this, and yet it's still a complete surprise. So yeah, I close to loved this film. I thought it was really great. I do have a couple of criticisms I've just got to quickly throw in there before we wrap up, just for the sake of balance, you understand. So the scene where Julie is used as bait in the woods is a little bit ridiculous. Why would you put Julie in a car and then go and sit in the underbrush in a spot where you can't see all the doors of the car, you can't see the two entryways leading to the car? It's just silly. And from the killer's point of view, why would you try and get Julie in this moment when it's so obviously a trap? And also, going back to good old Leslie again, it did cross my mind after I'd watched the film, why is he not arrested for the photos? Like, so it's established that the police don't consider him the sort of guy who could be the rapist, but surely he would be arrested for the photos. He's an employee of the school who is in possession of naked photos that he's clearly taken of one of the schoolgirls. So why is he not dragged into a cell for that? Like, surely this would lead to an arrest and prison time, unless this is just one of those things that could have been allowed to happen at a certain point, and it's been the legislation has been tightened up over time. But I'd find that very strange. You know, is it kind of like, they're just photos, I didn't sleep with her, so therefore you can't touch me, so you better let me go or my brief's going to have you for breakfast. It's 1972, mate. It's the Wild West. We might have twice as many bobbies in this era, but So we've arrived at that point where I would normally show you a copy of the movie I've just talked about, but I don't own Assault, but I could see that changing in the future because I enjoyed this that much. Yeah, I think I might like to buy this and add it to my collection, and I say that despite the fact that it's free to watch on YouTube. So if you haven't seen it and you want to check it out, just go and watch it for free on YouTube. The picture quality is pretty good, although I put it on my really large TV and this did lead to a bit of blurring, which can happen when you try to watch YouTube videos on a large monitor or a large TV screen. And I think that's also a reason why I might like to get a really good copy of this that's been really well remastered for bigger TVs. But like I said, I don't know if such a thing exists. I'm going to have to look into it. But for now, let's get to the bag of terror and find out how we're going to store this. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4 and a half. 4.5 bloody axes out of 5. A top dollar movie, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So we will leave it there for today. I'll be back soon. Until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.